Hey everybody, it's Adam from Underground Hive again. This is part 2 in the mix breakdown series of Underground Hive's Under the Moonlight. This will be the bass video. If you haven't watched part 1 and you don't know what this is about, go watch part 1. If you haven't listened to the song, you need to listen to the song first to figure out what's going on. I'll be playing maybe parts of the song throughout this, but for the most part it's going to be just focused on the bass. Please listen to the song. It's over link is in the description. I'll leave a link in the description of all the other parts of the videos. There will be 6. Again, we started with drums. This is the bass video. Number 2. Let's get on to it. When I record bass, I usually do, depending on the song, if I have any effects that I'm putting on the way in, I'll record 2 tracks. I'll use a Countryman 85 DI to split the tracks. One will be direct DI from the bass. The other one will go through my pedal board and then into my interface. So essentially I'm doing 2 DIs, just one that goes through my pedal board. On this one, I recorded using the Electro Harmonics bass soul food kind of overdrive distortion pedal, and then the MXR bass octave deluxe. And this is the sound that I got. So this riff was that was written by me, and it was basically what the song Under the Moonlight was written around. This was if you ever how did you write this song? It started with this bass riff, and the keyboard riff was added on. Those are the 2 signature parts, but really it started with this one bass riff, and we moved on from there. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to get a sound that sounded like exactly how when we play it live, and then I wanted some stuff to beef up under it. So we'll start with this. We'll start with this sound coming in. First thing I'm going to do is show you what I do on my bass. Actually, let's go to my track first. So first thing I do is I put EQ on it. I might have mentioned this in the drums video. I'm in the middle of switching all my EQs over to the JS Re-EQ plugin, the RE-EQ. Not to be confused with the REA EQ, which is one of the stock plugins in Reaper, or REQ, which is Renaissance EQ that Waves has. So there's 3 EQs with almost all the same names. I started using the Renaissance EQ just because it came in the bundle that I bought from Waves, and I decided why shouldn't I use the bundle that I bought? And it sounds good. What I find is you have to do bigger boosts and bigger cuts to get what other EQs can do in smaller boosts and smaller cuts. So as other EQs, I start off with like a 3 dB kind of general rule, and I try to go up in increments of 3, 6, 9, 12. If I can, no real reason, just to make decisions easier. And I'll talk about that decision process in the keyboard video with panning and things. But I try to eliminate as many decisions as I can. So I'd like to have a go-to EQ, like to have a go-to compressor, go-to saturator, that sort of thing. So I'll play this along, show you what EQ moves I did on the bass track, and I'll enable the EQ here. You'll notice there's a volume boost because I am doing some pretty big boosts. I did not take the volume and back it off on the output volume. Shame on me, but at least you can hear it better. First thing, high pass filter, anywhere from 20 to almost up to 50 or 60 hertz, depending on the song. This one sounded best at 50, and it seemed to work best with the kick at 50. Next one is I do a bump for this, it's usually between 90 and 200, and this one happened to be 121. Just no particular reason other than that's where it sounded good. I did a pretty big bump here. I did 8 dB. And that's also in the drum video, if you remember, I put that EQ on there to cut at 120. Next one, I take what I call like the cheap sound of the bass, and I try to get that that's somewhere around 308 hertz almost always, and I'll bump this up to know what it sounds like. It sounds like that plasticky, like $200 eBay bass that the neck is never straight and can't get into. That's not what my bass is, so I don't like that sound, so I cut that out. Usually around 3 dB. This happened to be 2.9. Who knows? Next I do a boost at, this one is a 1K. This is a pretty big one to get some attack in. I'm turning this one off. It's really like a scoop sound. Turning it on is really more what it sounds like when I play live. So I wanted that, and in this song especially, this needs to cut through. This is like the signature sound in the song. I want this to cut through everything. Another slight boost at 2500, same kind of thing. If I turn off, kind of doesn't have that sheen on it. Turn it back on, and then I do a cut right at 60 hertz. And this one I did about 6 dB cut, and that can't really tell. A little bit there, but it's mostly to get out of the way of the kick. So that's, you know, without the EQ. And sorry about the volume difference, it's gonna automatically sound better when I turn it up with the EQ. So it's night and day difference. Next thing I do, so basses, I recorded this, and this was a 2001 Zahn Sonus Custom. I probably won't give you information on the other instruments that are done because I don't own them, so I don't know as much detail about them. I had this one custom made out of a shop in California. It's the one over right here. It looks black. It's actually a really cool blue maple, like curly maple, bird's eye maple color to it. Maybe I'll do a video just on that bass at one point, but anyway. So then go to compression. I love the 1176 on my bass. It just works. I aim for somewhere around 3 dB of gain reduction on most of the parts. There's going to be louder and quieter parts and everything. And then I try to do, I do a better job at this than I did at EQ. I try to volume match them. So it's, unless you really hear, there's really not anything. I do it by ear because the meters are kind of goofy. Because I aim for like a negative 18 dB input on the track. It's a little bit lower, and you know, so I do it by ear. But what I do then is I double stack compressors. Take the same settings. I may have to adjust the input gain a little bit so I don't get too much going on, but I aim again for about 3 dB of gain reduction. And both those together just kind of glue the sound together, give it a more consistent, like, pro sounding performance. Or pro sounding sound. Performance is up, you know. That's arguable. Next one I really like is the JS saturation, and I crank this one all the way up on every time I use it on bass. And it adds a little bit like that Exciter plugin in the drum video. It adds some harmonics there that weren't there. It doesn't add distortion, although you wouldn't be able to tell because it's kind of a distorted track. And then I love this. You're gonna hear me say this about 1,000,000 times in these videos. I love the Kramer tape. I love this thing. I love this thing. I love this thing. There's two presets I use most of the time on bass. There's a clean bass DI and a dirty bass DI. Dirty is more for a clean sound, and a clean is more for a dirty sound from the source as far as that's. Because you don't want to really dirty up an already distorted sound anymore. But I do hit this pretty hard. I try to hit it right at 0 on the VU meter, and then adjust the playback output level to match. This one I leave the wow and flutter off, but I leave the noise all the way up. I just like the way it sounds. It adds some hiss and things, and hey, whatever. It sounds good. I like it. So this is so before all the effects, and then after. So now I'm gonna go to the bass bus folder, and I use the make sure you can see this. I use the Kramer HLS, which is a kind of like a channel strip analog emulator, and I do a trick that Andrew Sheps had on one of his videos recently in the last 3 or 4 months. Might have been a Waves video, might have been one of his own, where he takes the 700 hertz and I bumped it up by 2 dB, and that's it. I left everything alone. I adjusted the output match. Ignore this red needle because it's really not crushing it the way it looks like it is. Yeah, and that's all I'm doing here. It just adds a little more definition. So turn off. just a little more. And it's not, we're not looking for like a metal based song. This is by the way, if you haven't heard the song, go listen to the song. You're gonna get sick of me saying that. It's really like a synth bass. I'm looking for that synth, old time, 70s, almost 80s disco type synth sound for this song. So I have that on, and then I actually add everything to the stop playing. I actually add everything to the room reverb, but I have it so low you could see here it's like negative 24 dB on the send volume. So, but if you add, little tip here is if you add all of your instruments to the same room reverb, it can give it the sound as if you're in the same, you've actually performed it in the same room or recorded in the same room, rather than me recording in my home studio, the drummer recording in our practice place, guitarist recording it in the 3 different locations that he works in and does music in, and then the keyboardist doing it, and then vocals recorded all over the place. If you add that room reverb in, it helps kind of, I hate to use the word glue, but it does help glue everything together and make it sound like it was the same performance in the same studio. So I'll leave that on. You probably won't even notice it. When I do reverbs on things like this, I put it up to the point where I notice it and I back off a lot, because I don't want to really have it noticeable unless I'm using it for an effect, rather than having like a reverb on the bass. I would only do for like an effect type thing, a solo lick or something weird, some kind of weird effect. For this, I don't want anyone to be able to hear it. All right, so the second 2 tracks are going to be this DI, and without any effects, I'll just play one of them here. This is what the raw DI. I'm not doing anything on my interface. Actually, when I mentioned the recording path, pedal board, Countryman, both of those go into 2 channels. I have a Steinberg UR-RT4 interface, and I leave the Neve transformers on. I love this thing. It was, I don't know, $600. It's a 6-channel, has 4 XLRs on the front of it, the phantom power, all the things you'd expect, and then these Neve transformers just give another level of analog goodness to the sound. No EQ or anything on the way in, no compression on the way in, at least for this track. I'll talk about that on the last track a little bit. But here's the raw DI just going through this interface. So it's pretty good. It's pretty beefy bass tone. I've used that tone almost as is in other recordings that are just a clean bass tone. That's like my signature tone. But what I wanted to do is, because we're having a distorted signal here with the distortion in the octave, I want to have more beef. Because while this tone, that's what it sounds like when I play live, to me, both in my in-ears and in the studio, in the audience. I wanted more beef on the recording because I knew we would need it. So what I did is I used a tip that I first saw on Warren Hewert's Produce Like a Pro video. I'm sure tons of other people have used this trick, and I'm not even sure if Warren lays claim to doing this first. I'll bring up each EQ here. Hopefully you can see those. So here's the bass DI low, and here's the bass DI high. And I've split this into 2 tracks, split the same channel into 2 tracks. One, so I can deal with the lows separately. So everything in the high pass filter or low pass is at 200 hertz here. So everything under 200 hertz I'm dealing with on the low track. Everything over 200 hertz on the high pass filter I'm dealing with on the high track. So we'll do the low one first, and I'll go through each one of these. And again, this at this point is when I switched over from Renaissance EQ to the RE EQ. My goal is to switch to RE EQ for everything moving forward. It's cool looking. There's pretty colors, and you can see it a lot better. You have a lot more control over things, and the developer is actually actively working on things. He's actively participating in the groups and everything. So it's good to see someone actively developing something. And it's free, so it's obviously it's a great deal and everything. So first thing, I'll play this and I'll go through each one of these. As soon as I hit the EQ, all the top end is going to drop off. I do a cut at 60, which is where I'm getting away from the kick. And I do a boost at 121, which is I'm boosting the overall body of the bass. That's where my low end on my bass is for this track specifically. Then I hit it with the same 1176 compressors, about the same, looking at about 3 dB gain reduction at the high end, and then I double stack those as well, and it brings it all together. Real nice, tight, compact low end. But I also do hit it with the jazz saturation because I like a little more definition on it. And I backed off a little bit. I said I use 100% on bass tracks. This one, 71 was the magic number that day, so that's what I used. So now we have the low end. We'll do the top end. And again, first thing, so as soon as I put the high pass filter or the low pass filter on, it takes away all the bottom end out of it. I do a cut at that like cheap sounding part, and actually you can probably hear it a lot better on this EQ. That sounds like my first bass I ever owned, which was an old Beetle bass copy that actually had a plastic neck. You could bend that neck down an octave. I learned how to tap on that thing too, which is kind of insane. But this is not the sound I want coming out of my bass. So I bumped that down only by 3 dB in this case. And then I have a boost at 1K, another boost at almost 4K for some definition on there. So here I want to hit it with some distortion. First I'm going to do it with the Kramer tape. And this I use the Dirty Bass DI. Even though I said kind of in my last video, or last track, that it kind of lied about I use dirty on clean sounds and clean on dirty. I'm doing this on the clean sound before it turns dirty. I like the vibe that this gives, and I have another song coming up later this year that I'm going to really heavily use this to get my kind of signature tone there. Next thing, I want to distort this, and I have everyone has 1,000 different distortion available to them. I have a SansAmp plugin, a free one, BOS maybe, I don't remember the name of that, BOD, something like that. It sounds okay, but for some reason this cheap little thing, this is Waves, Came in the Horizon bundle that I own, the GTR Stomp, and you can, there's a whole bunch of different pedals on here, and they're all just copies of like the old Boss stuff, and this one even kind of looks like it. So turning this on gives that just nasty, gritty tone to it, and when I mix this, I mixed it with the low track. I'm kind of showing you just the track now, but I always try to mix it in context with something. And in this one, I mixed it with the low, and probably with the low and the drums. It's hard to mix bass with everything else going on, so I kind of add on layers and do it like I'm showing you these videos. So then I hit it with both 1176s. Get the compression in there, and then hit it with jazz saturation. And I think I just copied this one over from the other track. So that's the high track. We'll play them both together now. And now what you have is a gritty bass sound with a really, really tight, compressed low end. And then you mix it in. I mix it in with my effects track, which I call, which is the one off my pedal board. And I have, like, for me, for this song, the perfect bass tone. So there it is. Other tone I have in this is the slap bass, which I recorded on a 1996 maybe Zahn Sonus, which is this brown one right here. And as you can see here, the blue one you can't see it, but it has soap bar pickups on it. It's more a modern active bass. This is it does have an active preamp in it, but it is a jazz style bass. When Zahn came out with it, it was the jazz bass for the 90s. It has a great like Marcus Miller slap type tone. And this is completely unprocessed. Coming in right, I did record a DI and off my pedal board. The pedal board has a compressor pedal on it that's pretty aggressively set because I wanted that disco sound. I wanted that 70s disco super compressed Larry Graham. Those guys. Larry Graham's like, once I say Larry Graham, I can't even say any other name to compare it to. That's really the sound I'm looking for, and here's what that sounded like with no processing. So what I do here, hit it with very, very similar EQ. get the high pass filters down to 35. I get a bump at 121 again. That's the magic thing. I took a little bit more out of the cheap sound, and I'll bump this up. That sounds just god awful. I didn't want any of that in there, so I took it out. And it does scoop it a little bit, but for a slap bass, that's what you want. Next, for attack, bump at 1K, and another one at just shy of 2500. I typically take my EQs and I copy them from track to track and then adjust from there. And you'll see that, especially in the keyboard video. And then I do a cut at 60 Hz to get out of the way of the kick. For this, I only used one 1176 because I did have a lot of compression on the way in, and I didn't need to smooth it out as much, but I wanted the color. I could have probably gone without a compressor plug-in, but I wanted the analog color that the 76 adds. I really like that sound. Add the saturator on there. This is like one of the best, people post all the time, what's your favorite free plugin? JS Saturation, without a question. And then Kramer tape mono. I did use a clean bass DI because this is more of a slap bass. I don't want grit in there. I want more of a clean tone in there. So before and after. And I'll play some of these, play this with the drums. And then I'll play the verse with the drums. You can still hear the kick very cleanly. You can hear the bass very cleanly. You can still hear body in the bass. You can still hear low end. All right, so that's the bass video. Hopefully you learned something. What I try to strive for, because I have 100% control over what I record on my bass in my studio, on the speakers I'm used to, with the interface I'm used to. So I try to get I have don't want to brag, but I have really good quality instruments, and I want to get the best sound I can on the way in. So I don't need to do a lot of coloring. This one's a little different because it's more of a bass synth kind of sound. But for the most part, it's EQ, compression, saturation in various forms. And actually, you'll see that throughout the rest of these videos. EQ, compression, saturation, that's like the magic mix of things. All right, so we will see you on the next video. Next video is going to be keyboards. Stay tuned.